Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Dave, and as you know, I interpret everything. Today, I will be interpreting Austin Powers, the International Man of Mystery, which is the very first film in the iconic Austin Powers trilogy. One of, if not the most iconic and memorable performance that Mike Myers has ever done in his career. Before going in and rewatching this movie, I will admit the main thing that I actually remember about it was that it is one of the most iconic, memorable, and quotable comedies that I've ever seen in my life. Now, that might not necessarily be true anymore. It has almost been 20 years after all. However, I dove in headfirst to see if that is the case. Let's talk about it. So we have Mike Myers playing Austin Powers, who was a spy in the 60s who gets cryogenically frozen in order to stop Dr. Evil. Dr. Evil, of course, is a man that often has treacherous, terrible ideas to take over the world, and this time he plans to do what he always does and to hijack the world's arsenal of nuclear weapons in order to have the world pay him back to stop him. So narratively, when it comes down to this movie, you don't really care so much about what Dr. Evil is doing, right? The entire movie doesn't really focus that much on the whole idea that he is hijacking the world's arsenal of nuclear weapons. It doesn't really focus on it at all, actually. Instead, what it wants to do is to expose and make fun of practically every retro spy trope that it could get its hands on, particularly all the stuff that you can find in the James Bond movies in the 60s. And it does this through its sense of humor, and its sense of humor is split between a few varieties. You got parody or spoof, obviously making fun of those 60s spy movies. You got fish out of water, given the fact that he is from the 60s and he's cryogenically frozen to wake up in the late 90s. You got a lot of silly physical humor in the film, as well as this character is basically a cartoon character if you think about how off-the-wall crazy he is. So definitely a lot of slapstick humor in there, and it feels like it's all wound up in a style of humor that we often saw in the 90s and some in the 2000s that I call repetitious. That is, telling the same joke over and over again because the audience at home watching, they don't really expect it. So every single time they brought it up, it just tends to be funny. I haven't seen a ton of repetitious humor used in comedies anymore, and I feel like that's because it's a little bit of a risk nowadays because it makes movies feel boring and predictable and annoying. But back then in 1997, that wasn't always necessarily the case. I actually think that Mike Myers used that repetition skill very, very well. When you watch the movie back and you're like, this is ridiculous, it is stupid, it's a little bit annoying, but at the same time, I don't really mind it because it really is funny. Now, I will say not all the jokes in the movie will land for you. It might work better if you go back and you watch all those 60s James Bond movies because it'll click more with you as to what they're making fun of, but you don't need to. You watch the movie, it kind of is its own beast that you don't need to watch James Bond movies for. But kind of like with Galaxy Quest, it always helps to watch what they're making fun of in order to fully appreciate it. And obviously in 2024, people's sense of humor has changed dramatically. I don't know if some of the jokes that they made in this movie will work for a majority of people that watch it nowadays. Modern audiences very particular in their sense of humor, so I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it is just nostalgia for me that made me love the movie. But like I said, even I will admit that not all the jokes land. But honestly, you could love the movie, you could hate it. However, I think what's most important to note is that I heavily doubt that anybody would argue with the fact that the characters in this film are iconic and memorable, so are the lines. This is a very, very quotable film. And while it has been quite a while since I saw the other films in the series, I would even say that the sequel to this, The Spy Who Shagged Me, that's so much better than this movie. But this movie is, in its own right, funny. And when you look at the characters as a whole, they're all memorable, but nobody's as memorable as Mike Myers, as Austin Powers, and Dr. Evil. I'd even say that Dr. Evil's more memorable than Austin Powers, even though it's Austin Powers' own movie. And I might be a little bit blasphemy, it might be a little bit of a hot take to say that, but Dr. Evil to me is just more memorable as a whole. And I do have facts to back that up, given the fact that Mike Myers has reprised his role as Dr. Evil more times than anybody else. He has reprised his role as Dr. Evil in a few commercials, even just recently, proving that Dr. Evil's a fan favorite. He's really good at it. He's really the only person that can do Dr. Evil, which is actually kind of funny because originally he wasn't supposed to be Dr. Evil. Originally, they had cast Jim Carrey to play Dr. Evil. Can you imagine that? But Jim Carrey had other things that he had to do. Primarily, I think, one of the other most quotable, iconic comedies out there, Liar Liar. So he had to do that and had to turn on Dr. Evil at the end of the day. Thank God, given the fact that he just would not have been as good. Dr. Evil is Mike Myers. Mike Myers is Dr. Evil. And it just doesn't get any more obvious, straightforward than that. But if I had to rate the movie as a whole, I would have to say maybe B, maybe B minus. I'll just go with the higher of the two, B, given the fact that it is an iconic film. But obviously it does have its moments where it does get a little bit slower at times, and obviously it has its moments that could be better. It has its moments where some of the comedy maybe doesn't translate as well to a modern audience. The list goes on and on and on. It's a very decent film. You should at least watch it once, given how iconic and how memorable and how quotable it is as a whole. But because there's like no story, and all it is just making fun of trope after trope after trope, there's not much keeping you in terms of favoring this one over the next. But as it is, I will be giving this a letter grade of B. But what about you guys though? Are you a fan of Austin Powers? If you are, which of the trio is your favorite? And would you actually be interested in seeing an Austin Powers 4 if they made it today? Because I know I am. There's been talks, there's been rumors saying that Mike Myers will be doing it. I don't know how true those rumors are, but it would make sense. The only question is, what has he been doing this whole time? What does he think of the world now? Did he cryogenically freeze himself again and wind up in the 2020s? What's going on? I think that there's a lot of content there that would be really, really interesting. Taking a fish out of water story and making it even more of a fish out of water story. Now that would be pretty interesting. But what about you guys? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and as for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit that like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come out with the next review, whatever that may be. But until then, peace out.